Good morning, everybody. God dwells in you. Let us pray. Holy God, holy and mighty, holy immortal one, have mercy on us. Have mercy on us this day. Have mercy on all your people. Be present with us as a spirit of compassion. Be present with us as a spirit of wisdom. Help us to know where you are calling us, how you are calling us. Give us the strength and courage to follow that call. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Good morning, everybody. My name is Mike Kinman. I'm the rector here at All Saints Church. My pronouns are he, him. It is wonderful to have everybody here. This is an important conversation that we're going to be having this morning about a growing situation, and it's been growing for a long time, that is happening on our border. We do have a crisis happening, particularly at the San Isidro border station near Tijuana. And ever since that crisis has really reached a point where it is getting much more media coverage, we have been having conversations and people have been saying, what can I do? What is going on? A lot of what we're trying to do is to separate fact from fiction and then really look at what is happening down there and what are ways that we can not just sort of scratch our itch of wanting to do something, but truly be effective, and actually, in addition to that, not be harmful, not do something that is going to make a situation worse. And so there have been various different groups going over. Some more groups are going over. One of the things we'll talk about is there's a former priest from this congregation, Janine Scanoni, who is now rector of Good Samaritan Episcopal Church in San Diego. Her congregation has been doing some really wonderful work with people who have made it across the border and are just being dumped. And we're going to find out more about that. But for now, I want to say, first of all, want to say welcome here, want to say welcome to everyone who is streaming us online. Everyone turn and wave, say hello. And also want to tell you that in addition to this whole conversation, which will be about how we put our faith into action, we have an opportunity today to put our faith into action, and our action table is right over here. This week's action is about affordable housing, and we are petitioning Mayor Terry Tornek to take a piece of city property that is really perfect for permanent supportive housing for seniors. That is at Fair Oaks and Orange Grove, I believe. It's near a market, it's near public transportation, it's near restaurants, it's within walking distance to a lot of things. It's a really great place for something that we really need, which is permanent supportive housing for seniors. So we're asking everyone to go over here and sign on to a letter to Mayor Tornek. And also, if you're a Pasadena resident, we're asking you to sign an additional letter to your member of the city council, urging them to approve taking this property that's already owned by the city and using it for permanent supportive housing for seniors. Did I get that right? I'm looking over. I'm adding finally using it for that, we hope. So since Juliana tells it the way it really is, I'm just going to turn it over to her, and Juliana is going to introduce both the rest of our topic and our wonderful guest here this morning. Thank you. Juliana.
Thank you. So it is, once again, my pleasure to have a friend here in the Rector's Forum. Mayra Maceda-Nolan is actually one of the first community persons that I met when I came to work here 8.5 years ago at All Saints Church, because we tend to do the same work in our respective churches. So Mayra works at Lake Avenue Church doing a lot of peace and justice and community outreach work there, and that's what I was hired to do here at All Saints, and so we quickly became friends and colleagues in the best of ways. And so when Mike and I were discussing what was happening at the border and how we might address that in a Rector's Forum, I thought, hey, maybe I can ask Mayra to come and she can tell us about her recent experience there. So thanks to Mayra for being here, and let me do more of a formal introduction of Mayra. Mayra grew up in East Los Angeles, and she currently lives in Pasadena. She serves on pastoral staff of Lake Avenue Church, a large congregation that has been at the same location for over 120 years. Sounds familiar. She has spent the past 18 years leading in her local community and casting vision for kingdom neighbor loving. Her love for the local and global church fuels her current focus of speaking and teaching on issues related to leadership, race, ethnicity, gender, faith, justice, and the church. Mayra spends lots of time mentoring and learning from younger leaders in her church and community. She serves on various local and national boards, including the Clergy Community Coalition in Pasadena, and is chair of the board of directors of the Christian Community Development Association, CCDA. She is married to Chris, and they have 4 children ranging in age from 7 to 29. Besides Jesus, Mayra loves her community, the challenging and sacred call of pursuing justice, and shoes. So you can tell why we get along. I will also add that Mayra was selected recently and served on the community interview panel, which is helping choose our next police chief for the city of Pasadena, which is an immense job and task. And I was grateful to know among the many community members that my friend Mayra and my colleague Mayra were serving in that capacity. So thank you, Mayra, for accepting that call and for being with us today. Thank you. So I'll give this to you so you can have your own microphone. I think that we should just begin with your recent trip. You were there on Monday and Tuesday of this week, Mayra. Can you tell us what you experienced at the border and who you met, and maybe first describe the group that you traveled with?
Sure. It's an honor to be here. I've been in this room sitting where you are with some very amazing, listening and learning from some very amazing speakers. So it's an honor to be here. And I want to say also that I so appreciate All Saints Church and the care that is demonstrated by your congregation for the least of these all of the time, in ways that are really bold and courageous, and in ways that a lot of churches honestly are not engaging. So thank you for that. From the bottom of my heart, thank you for that, because I'm so moved by that. So I got to go to the border with some friends from Matthew 25, SoCal, Mateo 25, dear friends of mine. And the purpose of the trips last week, actually, it was Monday, a week ago tomorrow. The purpose of those trips was to take as many clergy down as possible to be able to be present in the space to provide spiritual and emotional support to members of the migrant caravan, refugees, and also to be able to listen to stories and bring back to local congregations in Southern California what we were seeing and the experience of people and that sort of thing. Because, of course, what is actually happening down there is very different from what we're seeing in the news. So it was quite an amazing experience. We actually changed the trip. The first 2 days of clergy groups were canceled because over last weekend, as you may recall, the camp moved from a very small, overcrowded field that flooded out during the rains to a larger space about 15 miles from the border. And so most of the people had moved, and we weren't sure what we were going to be able to do. Also, the border was shut down on Sunday for a few hours, so there was a bit of chaos. So we canceled the trip for the first 2 days, and a very small group of us went down to reassess. And then by Wednesday, I think there was a group of about 25 clergy that actually went down with Matthew 25.
So can you tell us a little bit about what you know about that move, the conditions that resulted in the need for that move, and what the Mexican government's role is in that moving of the migrants and those seeking asylum?
Yeah, so it is very controversial. First of all, the field where they were staying before it was tiny. I mean, I was imagining something a lot bigger than that. And it looks like maybe the field of the back of a school, if you can imagine, like maybe not even as big as a football field. Really small, it's more like a park. And there was no indoor, very, very little indoor space. But and then there's a little side street, and that street was packed. So by the time we went down there, most of the migrants had moved. I think there were about 200 people left, and they had closed off the field, so people were not allowed on the property anymore. So anyone remaining was actually camping on the physical side street, and there were barricades blocking it. And at that point, I think people were even being arrested for coming to serve food because they didn't want anybody to do anything to encourage the refugees who were staying on the street to remain. And as a matter of fact, multiple times a day, local authorities dressed in plain clothes, perhaps community leader types, I'm not sure who was there exactly, would come with vans and really try to encourage the people to get in the van to go to the new location. And when I say encourage, I was there and heard, and so I approached where the crowd was, and I heard, "This is your last chance. If you do not get on the van, you are going to be left here. There will be no police to protect you, no food, and the Zetas will come and get you." You know, so it was very much threatening, and a couple of times it got really tense, and it seemed like maybe there might be a little violence in Mayra because the migrants that were there were not trusting anyone. And they were saying like they're trying to trick us, you know, they just did not want to go. And as a matter of fact, when we arrived, the police that were guarding the barricade told us, "Are you sure you want to go in there? This is the worst of the caravan. These are the people who don't want to follow rules, who are, there's gang members in there. They're just like the worst people. They're the ones who don't want to leave and don't want to cooperate." And I was really disappointed because I actually wanted to go to El Barretal, the large location, and I'll tell you a little bit about why we didn't go there. But I was really disappointed until I heard that. Because then I thought, well, then this is where we should be. Right here with like, if that's how you're going to describe people, then this is where we belong. And it was so good to be there because the people were really appreciative that somebody was coming to care for them. And I'll tell you, of all of the things, of course, people were hungry. And there were no restrooms in that area. I mean, they're literally the local government is trying to push them out of that area. What they appreciated the most was just the accompaniment. And I wore this today because I don't wear this all the time, but I wore it because I wore it down there. And this really meant so much to the people to have clergy present and people to pray with them. I got to meet a woman who came from Guatemala. She left her 20-year-old daughter and 19-year-old daughter and newborn grandchild behind because her family just didn't have enough to eat. So she came and she traveled with her sister and her nephew and a friend of hers. And so we talked about her journey, some of the things she saw and experienced. She was washing a pair of socks in a cup of water. And we asked her if she had any more to wash, that we would be willing to help her wash. She was sitting on the curb doing that. And as she started to tell what the things that she had seen and why she came, there was grief and hope in her voice. And so we prayed with her. We prayed over her journey, over her future, her well-being, and the family that she left behind. And we prayed for her heart. And just all of her because of everything that she had experienced. And we know that with those types of trauma, there's long-lasting effects. So we prayed for her, and her friend was in a tent because now people at least have tents. They're not completely outdoors. And her friend came out of the tent, and she said, "Will you please pray with me? I'm not feeling well." And so I put my hand on her, and she probably had about 106 fever. And she had some kind of upper respiratory infection. So there is medics that have been coming every day and administering medication and antibiotics. But there had been upper respiratory infections was a common thing at that camp. And so she just was burning up. And she was in the tent, and the sun, it was chilly, but the sun was out, so the tent got warm. And she was hot, and it was going to rain the next day or in 2 days. No, I think we saw her on Tuesday, so it was going to rain on Wednesday, and it did. But she didn't want to leave. And that was the thing, over and over again, we saw that. Now, the majority of the people that moved to El Barretal, which is a larger facility that was more adequate for that size of crowd, actually does have indoor space. And so there's, maybe hundreds of people that are indoors, mostly women and children, or intact families, mom, dad, and kids. And then people who are more at risk of the elements, like people who are disabled and have some kind of medical issue. But the rest of the people, the thousands, are outdoors. So, this past rain that we had, the pelting rain was down there too, so most of the people were outdoors in that. And honestly, I'm not quite sure about the politics of the move, other than it was absolutely necessary to move people. But I'll tell you, some of the migrants in the old camp didn't want to leave because that was too far from the border. And so I think that's part of the reason. But too far from the border, and they were telling us that they had no idea what numbers were being called. And I said, is nobody coming and saying, like, we're on this number? And this family said no. And they said, and when we went to approach the border, we were not allowed to approach. We got to the bottom of the bridge, and we were turned away. And so there's no way for us to know. So we, texted some contacts and got, the information about the numbers that were called that day. And then we told her, the way things are going right now, your number's probably not going to be called for another 5 weeks. And they had no idea. They don't know if it's the next day or in 3 days. There's just, most people just do not understand how things are working.
So can we talk a little bit about that? Because we spoke briefly before we got started around, the communication efforts on the ground and how information gets shared. Because I know one of the challenges for us as those in a position of power and privilege who can provide aid and assistance is making sure that we're providing exactly that which the people on the ground need, right? That we're not making assumptions about what those needs are, that we're not just getting our information from the news. But it's challenging, right? Because there is no formal, organized effort at the border helping those migrants that are there. It's not like the Red Cross is taking this, like you said, Mayra, earlier. It's not like it is an internationally known refugee site to date. So how is information getting shared from what you could tell last week? So
people are amazing. Okay, so there are, within the refugee camp, there are organizers amongst the migrants that have taken on the leadership and really begun to organize themselves, or actually they have organized themselves all along, but locally they're the ones who are communicating with outside organizations, and so it is very grassroots, and so they're talking to organizations that they know that can bring what they need, and what they need is determined by the group of people. So it's really beautiful to watch that happen, although it's just not organized enough, and then there's not enough coming quickly enough. And when you're doing that, it's hard to get everything in efficiently to the hands of the people that need it. So there's some really good aspects of that and some really challenging ones. But for instance, Al Otro Lado is an organization in Tijuana that's doing amazing work. They're doing most of the important legal work on the ground with the migrants. And so everybody kind of has to be approved by the migrant organizers. Pueblos Sin Fronteras is also down there and doing really good work. They're coordinating a whole lot of the items that are being donated. But because it's still so chaotic, because Mexico is not acknowledged as a secondary country, therefore the camp is not acknowledged as a refugee camp officially. It makes it really, really challenging to get things down there. But Pueblos Sin Fronteras, actually, there's a place called Centro Cultural de la Raza in San Diego, and so Pueblos Sin Fronteras has this thing that they're calling Operación Hormiga. An hormiga is an ant. And so people bring large amounts of donations, they sort them, and then they send them over like a person at a time so that they can avoid some of the tariffs and some of the bureaucratic tape that comes into play when things like this are happening. So just people like you and I who are going across who are known, there's instructions, and then you know where to take them, and there are things that people are actually waiting for. But very well-meaning people are coming, with vanfuls of clothing, and so one day this group showed up with boxes of clothes that were needed, but they just showed up and opened up the van and started taking boxes out, and it was just a swarm happened. Everybody needs the things, and that thing was sorted, so there was clothes everywhere, and the people who most needed it couldn't even get in there. Children and women could not access the thing. So it's very, very important. And the organizers on the ground, they know that there are well-meaning people, but they're telling everyone, please do not come and parachute in and drop things off and leave. That's not helpful to us. That's not what we need.
Can I ask another question, Mike? Just keep going. Mayra, tell me more. So, Al Otro Lado, I appreciate you mentioning them because they're a phenomenal organization. Laura, she's just an excellent leader and attorney who so much heart and passion, and we actually invited her to come join us, but she's there right now working, right? So she and I have been in communication, and hopefully we'll be able to bring her in the new year so that you can learn more about that organization and the legal work that she and her team do with a lot of volunteers. And I'm hoping that for some of you who have legal experience in the audience, this is an organization that we might connect you to. Can you share, though, what you were seeing, learning about the legal support happening at the border and what that is all about? Because as you mentioned, you know, sort of the numbers and the entry, that's a huge feat in and of itself. Imagine coming to the border and having to learn this process and then knowing you're in a line and you don't know how long the line is. You know, what does it mean to have people there providing that legal support? Did you get a sense of that while you were there?
So have you heard about the book? You know, there's a book, and it's outside of the actual legal process. So there's a book. So if you're a migrant and you're just arriving, you hear where you're supposed to go, and it's actually organized by people in the migrant caravan. And so it's a ledger, and you walk up to the ledger and you put in your name, you sign in basically, and you're given a number. And so a number is assigned to every 10 people. So number 1710, you know, there'll be 10 people in that group. And currently I think that they're calling about 5 to 6 numbers a day. So 50 to 60 people. And I think that at the San Isidro, El Chaparral, East and West, there's a capacity of about 150 on each side, so 300 people, but only 50 or 60 are being processed every day. And I can't tell you exactly what is happening that is causing that delay, but it is significant. So when you have thousands of people, you have people, you know, in a process that might take 45 days, you know, people's numbers aren't going to come up sometimes for 4 to 6 months. So it's really horrible, the situation. So we don't know where this is going to land. And so currently, I think that tomorrow there's going to be a letter that's going to start being circulated to be sent to legislators, really demanding that the numbers be raised to what the capacity actually is. And so a bunch of people are going to be signing it. I think they have a lot of base signers right now, but you should be seeing that soon.
Yeah, part of what we've been sort of working on this from our standpoint here in Pasadena and LA, and also trying to connect with various people on this side of the border. And part of what I want to do is I'd like to share some of the things that we've been learning and see if they jive with some of the stuff you've been learning, so we can kind of fact check the information that we're getting. First of all, part of, and we mentioned this last week, is many of you may remember Janine Scanoni, who is a former priest here at All Saints Church. She's now the rector of Good Samaritan Episcopal Church in San Diego. And what we heard from Janine is what's happening when the 40, 50, 70 people actually get processed, and then they get held in a space for a couple days. But when they're finally released into America and they get to be here while they're waiting for their case to be heard, they're just dumped at a bus station in the middle of the night. And they don't know anyone, and they have nowhere to go. And so Janine and her congregation, another wonderful priest named Paige Blair and her congregation, St. Peter's Del Mar, and some other organizations, particularly I believe Jewish Family Service, are putting together kind of a makeshift shelter and trying to, first of all, go to the bus station. One of the most difficult things, I was talking to Janine yesterday, and she said one of the most difficult things to do is to actually get the people to go with them, because they're terrified. They have been attacked by so many different people all throughout their journey. They've gone through a harrowing process even after having their number called, and all of a sudden these people show up, and they're saying, oh, please come with me, and they're naturally not trusting at all. So actually part of what Janine is looking for is people who are bilingual, who speak fluent Spanish, who can continue to come and help them. She said, because that's actually the real exhausting work, is going to the bus station and trying to get people to come with them. But then when the ones who will come into the shelter, then they're really trying to figure out medium to long term, what can they do so they can live a dignified life and a safe life while they're waiting and have shelter, have food, have clothing? A lot of times they're kids. What's going to happen with the kids? These are people who've been through trauma. They need mental health care. Some of them have medical conditions. They're not getting any medication. It's a huge problem. So part of, Juliana, what you and I have been talking about is, because particularly we have this relationship with Janine, can that be something that All Saints particularly is working on, is supporting in that way? So we're really looking at working with Janine. I know Janine was here on Friday meeting with Francisco Garcia and some other people and talking about how we can all work together. So that's one piece of what's happening. Another thing is I went to a meeting on Tuesday at the diocese, at the Cathedral Center. There is a trip that is being planned for December 22nd. And it is with people who are working on the ground with Pueblos Sin Fronteras and a lot of the groups that you've been talking about. The service employees unions are organizing and are a primary driver. It's, I think, SEIU 721, I think it is. Hilda Garcia is coordinating this. And the idea is to bring a group down, I'm hoping to go on this, that they're really looking, but very specifically for RNs and people who have medical experience, people who are bilingual, social leaders, religious leaders, also political leaders. We're trying to, Judy Chu, and if you're out there, we're trying to get you to come on this trip with us, and to see what is going on there, to provide some very specific aid that people have been asking for. So part of what we've been hearing is, when they moved people to El Baratal, it's this concert venue that is about 15 miles, 45 minutes away from the border. The assumption is that part of why people were moved there is so they are further from the border. And it sounds like this is what you experienced also, that it wasn't so much the local police, but it was the federales who were not allowing people to enter the El Chaparral, where they sign themselves for the asylum process, which my understanding is that's illegal. By international law, you have to be allowed to present yourself for asylum. But then part of the reason that they're being held further from the border is so they will not have access to that spot. The numbers that we heard was a minimum of 6,000 people are at El Baratal, probably more. Does that kind of jive with what you're hearing?
It does, because people are arriving every day.
Right, yeah, people are arriving every day. And then the other thing that they said is that, again, much like the situation that Janine is experiencing at the bus stations, people have had such violence meted out to them by various groups along the way in there, that there is a mistrust, and it's very difficult sometimes to get people to help them, which is why particularly we need people who are bilingual, who can go and actually have some trauma experience and some counseling experience. Is that also part of what you experienced?
It is. We talked with a psychologist that was working with people and families and small children, and I can't even describe the amount of trauma based on the things that have happened. I mean, they've watched people die along the way. They've watched people's hands get cut off when a van door or something closes. They've watched people taken from their parents, children taken from their parents. I mean, it's just incredible, the amount of trauma. So it is. There's a huge amount of mistrust and really a tunnel vision. This is what the psychologist described, that there is nothing else that matters. Getting across is the only thing that matters. And all the trauma, everything is just kind of festering. And so people are not able to actually process anything. So it's just, listening to a psychologist as a non-mental health professional could be a little overwhelming. It's like, where do we begin? I mean, even when a family gets across, and if they qualify, actually win their case for asylum, the work that is going to take to help a family be healthy is going to be very long. A lot of work, but it's going to take a really long time.
Yeah. And then just a couple other things in terms that sort of gets into the final question I'd want to ask you, which is sort of like, can we talk about where could a church like All Saints be most effective? Is some of the things that we are hearing is that, as you said, new people are arriving all the time. New caravans are forming, and they're forming from Guatemala, El Salvador, and Nicaragua. what we heard that makes the situation in Nicaragua particularly difficult is that Nicaragua has shut down its border, and so that anyone who is left is criminalized, and if they are returned, they're immediately imprisoned for the crime of leaving the country. And so that creates an additional problem there, which you mentioned also, the situation in terms of there's no UN presence here. A lot of times in a situation like this, like what happened in Greece with Syrian refugees, the UNHCR, the UN High Commissioner on Refugees, would come in and they would work with local and national authorities to set up a refugee camp. And this is what UNHCR does. I've been to a UNHCR refugee camp in Ghana for Liberian refugees. UNHCR actually does this incredibly well. They're not being allowed to do this work right now. And part of the problem that we have as Americans is our government is not predisposed to lobby in the UN for this to be done. And so one of the things that we're looking at doing is the Episcopal Church and the Anglican Communion have observer status at the UN. So we're trying to see what we can do through the Anglican and Episcopal observers at the United Nations to see if there is any way to lobby for whatever shifts it would take to allow the UNHCR to go into this area and really help provide needed services, because this is what they do. So part of what we're going to be exploring is there any way that we can lobby the Episcopal and Anglican observers at the UN to do that work. So that is sort of one advocacy piece that we're hoping we're going to be able to do. But what I would ask you is, where do you think, A, as an institution, All Saints can be most effective, and B, as individuals, where can we be most effective?
So about maybe 7 months ago, I met a woman locally who is from Honduras, and she took the trek up with, at the time, a 2-month-old baby and a 1-year-old, and she made it, and she made it to Pasadena. And she was, we met her because she was having a hard time where she was staying, couldn't pay the rent in the room, and so she had slept a couple of nights at Villa Park. And so we've gotten to know her and her children, and have, she now has an asylum case and just got her work permit, but this is one person in our community, and so we know lots of people are going to eventually make their way up here, and once they're here, their life is going to be really difficult. So, so local congregations can be, work with someone. If there's family in the area, that usually the family is not able to provide all of the support because it's expensive, especially when you have like an entire family coming up. So partnering with Spanish-speaking congregations, even to get a community around them of people who speak the language, to provide all of the wraparound support that is necessary for people is really going to be important for the local church. So I think what I keep hearing over and over again is, how do we walk alongside, how do we accompany people on this journey? And so it doesn't make a lot of sense practically to send a lot of people down there, although it wouldn't hurt the economy because tourism has really been affected. So our Uber drivers, there's no Lyft in Tijuana. Our Uber drivers told us, sometimes when we were in the car for a long time, like, my business has gone down about 30%. My brother's store is completely shut down now because there is no way that any of the businesses can operate in that area. So there is, the people in Tijuana are experiencing all of the impact in an already strained economy. There are, 6,000 more people there that need help. And then they just had Haitians there, last year. And so there's this comparison even between how the Haitians conducted themselves and how Central Americans have conducted themselves. And there's a lot of very interesting views of people from Central America on behalf of people from Mexico. And so, we hear a lot of like, well, the Central Americans are not, they're not good, or they don't want to cooperate, or they're not. So there's a lot of great work happening locally in Tijuana, but there's also, the people are really beginning to feel the impact economically, and there's starting to be, some people who are just not very happy with what's happening. So even there, there's still a sense of not being welcome there. So once people get here, gosh, the best we could do, especially in this season, when we think about refugees and we think about the Holy Family, we think about Mary and Joseph, seeking refuge. And there's going to be a Posada at the border, too, next weekend. And so what a fitting picture of what we can do as a church in North America is to actually welcome people, to actually provide a place where people can actually find respite and get a little bit of rest as they continue their journey, because once they get here, their journey really is just, the next part is just starting.
So, I mean, is it, as we get, first of all, are there organizations that you know of that are actively working on resettlement? I know the government is shipping people really all over the country. Once they come through, although it sounds like they're just sort of dumping a lot of people as well. Are there organizations that specifically, you said partner with Spanish congregations? We have a Spanish-speaking portion of our congregation as well. Are there specific organizations that you would recommend that we would work with?
Well, I think that there's different ones all over, but I think the one that I know the most about is Matthew 25.
Right.
And they actually are working on a plan to make those connections. So Matthew 25 is already working with congregations, English and Spanish-speaking congregations, partnering them together for advocacy and support of immigrants in general. But right now they're working on deepening those partnerships and actually putting a process together to get people who are coming up to the LA area connected with a local congregation for support.
You ready to open it up, or do you have
Well,
anything
I
else?
just want
Yeah.
to point out that months ago, when we first became aware of the migrants and their journey, we made a document available with a variety of nonprofit organizations that are providing all kinds of assistance to those that are coming to Mexico. And so we recently updated that sheet, and at the top I included some organizations that Janine Scanoni made us aware of, so that we can provide this to you, because one of the most significant things that we can do from here right now, until we know how we can best show up for those directly at the border and those entering and coming through in San Diego, is by financially providing support to organizations who are experts in this work and are on the ground. And so I have some copies of this document here with me today. If you want to get one, I'll leave them at the action table, so that way I know you go to the action table and sign that letter to the mayor and to your council member. But so I'll leave them there. They'll also be available at the action table outside. But a gift of any amount would make a significant difference in the lives of these individuals and the organizations that are serving them. So I just want to make a plug for that before you leave.
Right, and I was about to say open it up, but I look at it's like 10:59, and I apologize that I wasn't looking at the clock, and there was so much information that we wanted to be able to kind of get out there for you. And so I would just say, actually, for both of you, is there anything that you would sort of leave us with as a parting word?
I think one of the most important things that we can remind our neighbors is these are real people. So humanizing the migrant caravan, referring to people as refugees, whether or not it's an official refugee camp. If you read about a story of a family, share it. I met a woman who was pregnant when she started the journey. She had her baby in Mexico City, and then made it on buses and cars the rest of the way up. I got to meet her and hold her newborn baby. These are real people, children who have colds, and maybe even I heard that there was an outbreak of the measles at El Barretal. So there's so much, but these are real people. I think that's the most important thing to remember and remind our friends and neighbors.
I'll just maybe close with this quote that I came across coincidentally. I was at the Marciano Art Foundation on Friday. It was my first visit there, and there was a great exhibit from this Japanese artist who does these pieces that focuses on asylum and refugees. And next to a piece, he placed a quote from St. Augustine of Hippo that says, "You cannot do good to all. You are to pay special attention to those who, by the accidents of time or place or circumstances, are brought into closer connection with you." And I was very moved by that quote, because I thought, this is what we're being called to do. These individuals, these people with stories, these persons, these siblings of ours are coming to us, and we may not be able to serve everyone, but we can certainly serve those who are coming to us, and they're right here at the border. And so I look forward to working with you, Mayra, and partners at Matthew 25, and Janine and Francisco. I mean, I think we have a really good, solid network of people that we can turn to and that we can work together with in order to best serve our siblings that are coming towards us.
Okay, thank you so much, Mayra. Thank you, as always, Juliana. And thank you all.